Hello, everyone, and welcome to Can AIOps Help Rescue Businesses from COVID-19 Disruption? My name is Tabitha Ishman, and I am the marketing manager at Excalibur Data Systems. We are a boutique integrator of IT service management and enterprise service management solutions. We're very excited today to be partnering with DRYiCE, a division of HCL Technologies, to help our customers enable a service-oriented enterprise. I'm very happy to announce the strategic partnership and share the thought leadership that DRYiCE has shared with us. So to get us started, I'd like to introduce Clayton Ching, Global Head of Product and Offering Management at DRYiCE. So Clayton, you can go ahead and kick us off.
Thank you very much, Tabitha. And certainly thank you very much to Excalibur Data Systems for hosting this event. We really appreciate that. And we really hope for a very strong partnership to continue on. So thank you very much. Just to get things rolling, though, just to get the topic rolling, just starting right off here, enterprises started to embark on a path of digital transformation. I think we all realize that that's happening right now. In fact, we all realize probably now more than ever, right? We're operating in the new normal now. The C-19 is upon us. Two things are happening right now across virtually every sector that I'm dealing with today. Every market, every sector, every vertical is everybody wants to figure out how they can automate more. And everybody wants to try to figure out how they can work from anywhere. Those are two just extremely significant areas that people and companies are trying to work with today. So the purpose of this particular introduction is just to simply say, I don't believe there has been a sector that has not been affected by those two areas. How can I automate more, and how can I work from anywhere? I mean, just more recently, prior to the C-19 occurring, I was ready to take a vacation. Obviously, we had to cancel that vacation because of it. We were traveling overseas, and naturally, things got shut down. The travel industry completely stopped. Now, what does that mean to the consumer? More importantly, what did that mean to me and my family? Well, the point is, the travel industry took hold of this issues and really tried to automate just as much as possible in the system. So for almost all of the processes to help change and reorganize my trip took place through automation in the travel industry. I thought this was amazing to me. And I didn't really have to even speak to a human being, even though for many of us who probably prefer to do that, I didn't really have to do that. I spoke to an automated system. I communicated with the automated system. Those systems were able to change my reservations, cancel my reservations, alter, refund whatever funds I had that were already put forth within my reservation. All that happened in a very, very streamlined, automated fashion. And actually, from a customer satisfaction level, yeah, it made me pretty happy, right? I didn't have to pay any penalties associated with it. There wasn't any delays associated with it. Refunds happened very quickly on my end, and I was left with actually a very, very good feeling about the way I was being treated. Now, we know not everybody gets treated differently throughout any of these conditions, but in my situation, I recognized very quickly that automation and the ability for an industry to change very quickly changed my view very fast and made me a very happy customer. So customer satisfaction levels went way up. But that's just one of my examples from the different areas that are happening. As I mentioned just a minute ago, I believe every sector has been affected by this. And every sector that I've been speaking to has very much a concern of how can I automate more, and how can my employees work from anywhere? Is that something I can start to manage now effectively? So that's a huge part of the digital transformation journey I think a lot of our enterprises have to deal with today. Naturally, I mentioned the C-19 condition, nothing new. We've seen this now for several months. Everybody's being faced with this situation now. Let me just read just briefly. I won't read the slide to you, but there is some bullets on the right-hand side of the slide that I think really hone itself very well into what we need to think about now, and it's in bold. Businesses can shift technology capacity and investments. Businesses that can shift technology and capacity and investments to digital platforms will mitigate the impact of the outbreak. I think that says it all. If we can start shifting as much as we can to technology, invest in the digital platform, it will really help out our businesses in as much as we can. Now, there is a bottom line. We know that everyone I'm speaking to right now, I mean, I've never seen it before, but 100% of every company I'm speaking to today, their enterprises, people that run their enterprises, are anticipating they're going to have to deal with cost and have to be more efficient. Absolutely right. 100% of everybody will have to deal with that today. Now, what is the natural challenge that has to be associated with it? Well, a lot of our organizations naturally run by the CIOs, run perhaps by the CTOs of the organizations are going to be charted with figuring out what this new technology is all about. Right? How can I now manage my costs more effectively? We know costs will be affected. We know this. How can it do more with less? In other words, how can it be more efficient? More importantly, though, I want to make sure we can mitigate the risk. Just like as though my story in the travel industry, I'm a very happy customer now because they managed that. They took care of me very, very well. I'm sure they take care of a lot of other customers very well also. But from the standpoint of my perception is they mitigated that risk well. They knew they had to, and they mitigated it well. So we need to respond very well to short and long-term actions, right? We need to embrace as many technology efforts as we can in terms of what we're doing in the digital world. So here's some questions that I think will resonate with everybody that's listening in on this call. With a sudden upsurge of incidents, and there will be and there has been, sudden upsurge of incidents, how do you make your people and processes more efficient, effective, and more responsive? How do you do that? Another good question. How do you make your organization more responsive at a reduced cost? Number 3, how do you mitigate the risk of application outages and declining user experience while your organization is recovering from financial distress? We know this is happening today, but mitigating that risk in as much as we can. We know we can't eliminate risk. Let's be realistic, but we know we can mitigate this risk as much as possible. And finally, I have a 4th question here. Is your organization prepared to effectively tackle the surge of questions or queries due to this new normal, where everybody's working from home, or what we like to call today work from anywhere? How do you handle that effectively? How do you tackle that? If I suddenly have an organization of let's say 500, 1,000 people working in a normal in what we now consider to be, what we used to consider to be a normal corporate environment, suddenly that massive shift now takes place where they're working elsewhere. Can we effectively tackle that and still maintain the business as going forward? Well, here's what we have then, right? These are all the terms and how can we deal with this, and these are the types of questions that I think we have to deal with today, right? Resilience. We have to look at COVID-19. How do we deal with response, cost, risk, effectiveness, right? These are all things that we've all heard before, but now I think with the C-19 conditions that we'll all have to deal with, these conditions have now been elevated. And I think we now have to relook at things and maybe reprioritize some of the things that we've been having to deal with in the past. Reprioritization, nothing wrong with that. We do that all the time. But this change has now caused us to really accelerate that to a point where we really have to start considering this today rather than considering it tomorrow. So what do we think we need? Well, the concept here is automation. We know about automation, right? Automation has been around forever. I mean, you can go back 30, 40 years where people have been, IT organizations have been structured around how do we automate this, how do we automate that. But now we enter the world of AI, right? AI is real. AI is here. It's adding intelligence to what we've already had, or some people call that intelligent automation. But what does that mean? Well, we know that automation, for the most part, has been largely a brute force concept. You automate something, you execute something on a more quote unquote brute force method. In other words, the execution of a linear script. Done. Well, that used to work. That maybe that worked, maybe that didn't work. We know that there are failures associated with executing brute force automation. Right? Sometimes it worked, sometimes it didn't work. Sometimes a problem just reoccurred again, and then maybe you re-execute that same automation script once again, and then it goes away, and then maybe 5 minutes later it comes back. That's not really solving anything, because the past levels of automation dealt with the construct, very simplistic concepts. But today's environment are much more complex than that. Automation systems therefore have to also be more complex and have to be perhaps AI oriented to really accomplish what you need to accomplish. In the old days, yes, automation maybe could be accomplished with the simplicity of just a script. But today, certainly in a cloud environment, you're dealing with massive systems, very complex applications that are spanning multiple servers, processes and procedures and workflows that are spanning not only multiple servers, but multiple geographies. You might have an environment, a system that starts, or a process that starts in Singapore, traverses itself to New York, and then continues its operation into London. How do you understand how to automate this? How do you see what's happening in this system? Very difficult for an individual to see that. Data involved in that, the complexity involved in that is difficult for individuals or organizations to be able to see that. AI is what we believe and what we're seeing right now is something able to solve, because now it's able to consume vast amounts of data in an intelligent way. So we believe intelligent automation is simply, as it states on the slide, it's no longer a choice. In other words, it's not something we see that you can say, well, let's look at it tomorrow or next week or push it off to the year 2021. We believe it's something that it's a necessity as of today. And yes, the C-19 and the pandemic we're involved with probably elevated that, pushed it, forcing us to deal with it maybe sooner than we wanted to deal with it. So AI-led operations, really, we believe at this point, is the key to getting us and really helping us through a lot of the conditions we're seeing today. Other key point is how fast do you implement it? As we come out of the crisis, and we will come out of this crisis, the pandemic, it eventually will end. Nobody's doubting that. When it ends, though, is what we're really questioning. But nobody doubts that we will eventually come out of it. But as we do come out of it, the requirement for intelligent automation solutions with a short implementation cycle where we can realize really fast return on investment will be very important. I'm representing this as something that we can see results in weeks rather than more than several months, simply because of the situation we're in. We're dealing with a lot of competition in the marketplace. The sectors or the verticals that you might be involved with will certainly have competition, and you need to start responding to that as quickly as possible. Therefore, the implementations around this really need to take place quickly. Weeks, not months. So what are some areas that we think will really help you in this new normal? How do you drive what used to be IT ops into this concept now called AIOps? AIOps is, artificial intelligent operations. How can I help my environment by the infusion of AI. Well, from an automation standpoint, I want to be able to automatically remediate, pure and simple. Can I wait for a human being to look at a problem, find a solution to the problem, make a decision whether or not that problem is correct, and then manually implement that? Right? The MTTR on that, on what I've just described, is enormous. Mean time to repair. It is extremely long. What I'm suggesting here, what we're representing here on this, is automatic or auto remediation. Clearly, if we can let the machine process it, it will do so much faster. It would do so intelligently as well, by understanding the risk involved with the options it has at hand. So if you have a AI or an artificial intelligent automated system, and you see a problem happening in your environment, it could look at all the number of options to actually be capable of solving that particular problem or remediating that problem. And with all the options associated with that, it can intelligently say, well, here's the top three. Of the top three, the odds, the best possible confidence I have on fixing it is the following. I can execute that automatically now. The idea also becomes a self-learning, not only just self-healing, but self-learning. So as an AI system executes and remediates and solves problems, it also incorporates that back into its environment, into its engine, where it says, well, you know, it solved this problem and it solved it well. I'll add that now statistic to my environment, and I'll know that and learn from this over time. So as new problems come up, it adds that learning to its environment. As existing problems continue to occur, and they will, it will add that learning to its environment as well. So it's not only self-healing, but AI also is self-learning. So we obviously can see tremendous improvements in cost, efficiency, and risk. The key here is mean time to repair. On the other side of the coin, how do we enhance our employee group, our employees right now that are working from anywhere? Not work from home, they work from anywhere now. By doing so, you need to be able to understand how you can automate that as well. How you can automate the devices, all the hundreds and thousands of devices that might be you're needing to manage, and still mitigate the risk, because we still have security risks. It still has to happen. And yet, and our employees still need to have access to the environments. They still need to be able to manage and control, take their responsibilities and manage those specific environments. So how do we now manage that workplace? And how do we optimize that? All that can take place quite effectively. Just to introduce our partnership right now with Excalibur Data Systems, some DRYiCE solutions here. You know, we have a product called DRYiCE iAutomate, intelligent runbook automation. Intelligent is the key. Not only is it self-healing, but it is also self-learning. It can automatically detect detection of the automation potential of a particular problem. Once we know the probable root cause of an IT problem, iAutomate can intelligently analyze the thousands of runbooks we have, understand what's happening there, and react to that and remediate the problem automatically. iAutomate has an option. You can say, well, you know what, if we're unsure about the runbooks that we currently have in store, we can let a human take the action as well. So you can allow for a human interaction to trigger a solution, or we can allow the iAutomate product itself to trigger the remediation of the solution. DRYiCE OptiBot, digital workplace optimization, right? It can preemptively resolve various common problems, right, through an unassisted automation. In other words, you might have heard the concept called shift left. Shift left means that it's self-service. Shift right means you have to have a lot of interactions with your IT staff to get something done, to process it, maybe due to complexity or maybe because there's nothing else available. So the concept of OptiBot is digitizing your workplace optimization. In other words, your laptops, your cell phones, right, your smartphones, any devices that you have to deal with your consumers, your any sort of pod or tablet type computers that your organization has to deal with can resolve various issues within your organization automatically. Manage it, processes it for you, push out solutions automatically. So there's AIOps and OptiBot. So where they kind of sit within an organization is really just in front of you here. I like to think of this as left and right. So if you look at the middle of the screen, it says event, or roughly the middle of the screen, event correlation layer. And everything to the left of that are your ground level types of solutions, right? Your monitoring layers, your application monitoring layers, your event management systems, and so forth. And you go over further are your physical devices, your sensors, and your apps. All that's going to be processing in your system. So where do we sit within that environment? Like I said, left and right. The right side is where we sit, the automation component there, OptiBot and AIOps. Once we have the fundamentals structures all set up, or what we call the instrumentation layer, once that's done, and once that data is being fed in, we read that information. We, meaning OptiBot and AIOps, and we construct the solutions based on what we're understanding so that we can ultimately push it out and help the consumer. So we're very much involved in the overall infrastructure of your environment. And for the purposes of this conversation we're having you here, we're sitting in the automation construct, the automation layer. Just for a quick example of what we've done in the industry today, we do have a company in Finland that we work with very, very closely. Good-sized company, about 100,000 employees, $24 billion US dollars in revenue here. I translated everything into US dollars. They just add a little bit more if you're involved in the euro. But a good-sized company nevertheless. Very much communications IT, very IT structured and oriented. From the standpoint of this organization, though, they had a customer sat problem. Customer sat, clearly. Their consumers are unhappy with the responsive nature of their environment, of their company. It doesn't matter what it is, they just weren't happy with it. Customer sat. Are you happy with the customer? Yes or no? And the response was, for the most part, no. How do you fix some of these problems here? So what are some of the challenges that they had involving some of the business issues that they were dealing with? Well, they had a very complex infrastructure. How do you deal with that? They're dealing with multiple vendors. Not uncommon. 6 is actually low in many cases. Many companies I work with have more vendor incumbents involved. But how do you correlate and aggregate everything those other vendors are trying to accomplish, right? Or those products are trying to accomplish? How do you manage different technology towers? Classic challenge. Rising cost, unpredictable surges. You had enormous amount of surges and decrease in ticket volumes, right? Rise and reductions in people calling in, saying, hey, I have a problem here, I have a problem there. I need you to fix my problem. They couldn't predict that. How do you handle the spikes? And more importantly, how do you handle the valleys, right? Spikes and valleys, how you deal with the challenges here. The bottom one there says inefficient operations. Well, for the most part, I can sum it up relatively quickly, was that they had a lot of manual operations. Nothing's wrong with that. They were having to deal with people having to implement solutions without the advantages of any kind of automation. So we've included then the discussion here on AIOps. How can we first identify potential automations that can happen to handle in your environment? AIOps can do that. It can say, we've identified X number of potential automations for you, which could represent several hundred or several thousand relatively quickly, just by analyzing your environment. We've implemented using ITPAM, which is actually a partner of HCL DRYiCE, which then implemented very specific use cases, going against about 150,000 service tickets. And we fully automated those. Huge reduction and a huge improvement, number one, in automation. So we intelligently automated their environment very, very quickly. Now, with that in mind, iAutomate has the ability to read and understand. What is included in iAutomate is a natural language processing engine. And the industry calls that NLP. What that means is it can read. It can read languages. In this case, it can read English language. It could also read the Finnish language. It can read and understand the description of the problem that's being opened, and then intelligently recommend the solution very quickly and very easily. Minimal human involvement, minimum human touch. In this case, in some cases, it was actually zero human touch. So our impact in this is actually really quite strong. Really an outstanding resolution rate, tremendous reduction in mean time to repair, and certainly just simply hours saved on a human level was tremendous. As you can see the numbers we have on this slide. Well, thank you for participating in this. We'd certainly like to tell you a little bit about DRYiCE, and we certainly welcome and encourage, and we welcome the partnership with Excalibur Data Systems to work with us in many of these areas. Our product line is really designed around real world. We leverage our experience amongst the thousands of customers we have within our parent company, HCL. We have implemented, the AI and natural language processing automation technologies within the organization, and have given you the ability to integrate that with many, many software vendors in the marketplace. So you lose nothing. You can implement this system sitting on top of and integrate with many of the enterprise vendor products you probably currently have today. We believe it's almost no risk. You're able to control the aspect of what you automate, what you perhaps don't wish to automate. We've been doing this for over 7 years now, actually approaching 10 now. Where we've created a lot of IP associated with artificial intelligence and machine learning, as well as natural language processing. So we've done a lot in the marketplace. We've creating a tremendous amount of investment in the world today with a very large customer base. And with that, Tabitha, if there are any questions that have been initiated by our audience, I'll turn the floor over to you to see if we have any of those, and we can pursue with answering some of those questions.
Okay, so we did have a few come in, so thank you very much, Clayton. I think the best one to start with is, where do they start? That's they want to know, how do they get started?
I'm glad that question is being asked. I think that is one of the best questions that anyone can ask. AI, of course, is can lead people to have a little bit of caution, right? They don't quite know what to expect. Am I really turning my system completely over to some algorithms or complex algorithms to make decisions for me? And the answer is, you don't have to. But where do I start? Yeah, what I like to also say is, don't start from an IT level. Start from a business level. I firmly recommend, I strongly recommend, that start with the concept of, what business problem am I trying to solve, and go from there. So a business problem, for example, might represent customer sat, which I mentioned previously in the example, customer satisfaction. If customer satisfaction is low, that's a business problem. Now, what can I do within the IT organization to help solve that? Start with that idea in mind and go from there. Now, from there, you can start implementing all sorts of technologies to help. If the problem is in customer sat is response time to trouble tickets, then that's something we can that can be automated. If the customer sat is coming from an internal level, your employees have which always can happen, right? Your employees at a company could have customer sat issues as well, for any number of reasons. I can't get my equipment. I can't get my laptop operating. My mobile device cannot connect. Those are all things from a work from anywhere problem. And from there, you can then lead yourself down the correct path to go in terms of how to get started. But again, recommend that everybody start from, what business problem am I trying to solve? I recommend don't just say, hey, I want to reduce the number of tickets. That may or may not solve anything for you, except for the fact that you reduce tickets, which may be a problem manifesting itself in other areas. But again, start from what business problem you're trying to solve.
We had another attendee ask, how do your products self-learn and how long does this take?
Okay. Yes, the AI system here is, self-learning means it's being initiating itself in a supervised or unsupervised way. Let me answer the second part of the question before I answer the first part of the question. How long does it take? So iAutomate, in particular, in this part of the conversation, comes preloaded with automations. It's already there. Thousands of automations are already loaded into the system. So the learning process for it is actually quite short. It learns from the environment based on what we've already taught it. So again, it already comes preloaded. I would say probably good 75, 80% of what it needs to run a typical IT organization is already included in the box. Now, what it needs to learn then is the specifics about an individual company, right? If every company is a little bit different that operates in their own sector, and what our product then does, our product or iAutomate has to learn is what is unique about the particular company or the enterprise it's currently in. So that cuts down on the learning time tremendously. If in fact, and we're very confident of the fact that it already knows probably 75 or 80% of what it needs to understand, and then it picks up the rest of it as it goes forward. So we're cutting the learning time down. Instead of months, it can easily happen within maybe a few weeks, maybe let's say 4 to 6 weeks. So the learning time is tremendously reduced because of the fact that we're giving a lot of things out of the box already within the system.
We did have another question come in. What should clients expect in terms of ROI from this type of automation solution?
Return on investment. Yeah. Well, what can we expect to happen there? In my example, ROIs do vary, and the ROI could be simply in the reduction of mean time to repair. The reduction could be in time savings, right? Every company is going to be a little bit different, but in terms of automation or the speed involved in which these types of technologies can operate in, the ROI can be just amazing. For instance, in my example here, we see a resolution rate, and we did calculate it out for this customer we're dealing with here, was reduction in mean time to repair of 87%, 88%, which is enormous. So imagine if the mean time to repair on a typical problem would, let's say, was 10 hours. If I can cut that down by half, I'd be doing a great job. But in this particular case, we cut it down by almost 88%, almost 90%, simply because of the responsiveness of the system and the automation that we have included in the environment, and the fact that it's initiating everything automatically now. We haven't removed the human, but we've allowed the human being to initiate actions where appropriate, and allow the system to automatically initiate the systems as the human being requires. So the ROI can span a lot of areas, but certainly resolution rate, mean time to repair, and certainly hours saved are certainly 3 key areas that we like to discuss.
I think that kind of flows well into this next question. How do you ensure that no disruptions are going to happen in an environment when AI takes control?
Yeah, wow, that's the trust element. That's a very good question, Tabitha. how can I ensure that? Well, the first thing that we recommend is you run it through a series of tests to ensure that there are no disruptions. But more importantly, our product provides you with the option of human automation control first. It's a simple switch that you toggle that says, you know what, before any automations take place, I want a human being to look at it first. And then a human being can hit the switch and the automation can take place. So the first thing we always recommend is get comfortable with the environment, because the system is learning, as I said, right? We're giving you probably 75, 80% of what you need, but the system will also have to learn. And as the system starts to learn and mature and gain additional knowledge about your specific environment, then you can turn more and more switches on so the system can then start to automate without the use of a human being. Start off with that in mind. It'll certainly improve your comfort level, and it'll also reduce any sort of unanticipated disruptions that might occur.
So one
Okay.
of the last questions, I think that makes a lot of sense as well, is what if they've already made investments in the area of automation? Like, what happens to that?
Everyone does, and we, with that in mind, we can incorporate existing run books, for instance. We know you're going to have run books. We know companies are already going to have things included in the environment. Things like that can be incorporated. That is not an issue. In addition to that, we integrate with all the leading vendors in the marketplace today, whether it be monitoring, whether it be specialized orchestration. We integrate extremely well. Talking about the product line I just discussed, we integrate with all the leading vendors. And so for those things that we don't integrate with, or those don't communicate with, we can additionally add those to our integration portfolio as well. But for those things that everybody's going to have it, just to make sure everybody's aware, we realize the marketplace has many other components in the marketplace. So not only do we integrate well with on-prem environments, we integrate extremely well with cloud environments. The leading cloud vendors that you all know and love, we integrate very well with those and operate fully functionally in those systems as well. So those of you that have systems in place, automations in place, we certainly can adjust well within those in your environment as well.
Awesome. So we're going to close the webinar now. These are the questions that came through. So I'd just like to thank our partner DRYiCE and obviously Clayton for sharing his thoughts on AIOps and automation. And we will talk to everyone again soon. So thank you everyone that joined us today.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Goodbye.